Hello and welcome. We're excited to have all of you with us today to learn some tips and tricks on how you can tell great stories through story maps. We have some great speakers lined up today, and we hope to provide you some context around story maps, and we'll be providing some demos. As you can see, here is our agenda. We will begin with Alan Carroll. He's our first presenter. He'll shed some light on what story maps are. He'll share some examples of story maps and why we tell stories. Following Alan is Grayson Harris. He'll be providing a demo on how to build a story map, show us where we can find some resources for continued inspiration. And after that, we will get a sneak peek at the next generation of story maps. We'll wrap up today with some questions from all of you. And finally, we'll be sharing some details regarding this year's Tribal Story Map Challenge. If you have any questions for our speakers during this session, please use the GoToWebinar console. We'll be responding to your questions after the presentation concludes. If we are unable to answer any of your questions during this session, we'll be replying to you by email. And now, without any further delay, we will go ahead and welcome Alan Carroll. So thank you, Alan.
Sure. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. There we go. I hope you're all seeing big story maps in the middle of your screen. That's been my life the last 8 years or so. I founded the Story Maps team here at Esri, and I came to Esri after 27 years at National Geographic. And of course, National Geographic is known for beautiful images and beautiful maps. And so I've been interested in telling stories with maps for a long time, but even more interested in kind of combining, using the power of the internet and the digital age to combine beautiful images and other multimedia content to tell stories. And so that's what we've been working on. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you what the basics of story maps are. And of course, I'm going to show you the basics of story maps in the form of a story map. I've pretty much given up on PowerPoint because story maps do everything that PowerPoint does as far as I'm concerned, and a whole lot more. So let me dive in here. So story maps are web applications that combine interactive maps. So those are maps that you might have created in ArcGIS Desktop or directly in Esri's cloud service, ArcGIS Online. You can also tap into the huge ecosystem of maps, shared maps on ArcGIS Online, including Esri's Living Atlas of the World, which presents a curated set of really beautiful, authoritative content in the form of maps, imagery, etc. So you can combine those with your multimedia content. So that means your photos, your videos, occasionally audio as well, with text, of course, to tell all sorts of stories about the world. And stories literally cover the earth and go from worldwide to regional, right down to neighborhoods and everything in between. Story maps work on a variety of screen sizes. So in other words, they're responsive. So the story you produce will work just fine on a mobile device as well as a tablet or a PC. And this is most important to me because I am not a technical person. So they incorporate interactive builders, so which you'll see. So this means that you don't need any web development skills. You don't need to know things like JavaScript and CSS and stuff like that. So it's still kind of a mystery to me in order to create a quite sophisticated multimedia presentation. Story maps are hosted by Esri in the cloud, so you don't have to worry about hosting. But they're open source, which means that if you do want to host them yourselves, you can find the source code, you can download it, if you're a developer, you can modify it, or you can work with developers to customize that source code as much as you want to host and create your own highly customized story map if you'd like. We have over the years developed a handful of user experiences that provide or enable various ways of telling map-based stories. And I'm going to run through those quickly and sort of conceptually, and then I'm going to show you examples of actually tribal stories in most of these categories. So hang in there and you'll see some live examples. My team's favorite and my favorite is Story Map Cascade. And the idea with Cascade is the whole screen scrolls I'll show you that shortly. It's very versatile, can combine lots of beautiful content in lots of different ways. Our most popular app is Story Map Journal, and instead of the whole screen scrolling, what we call the side panel scrolls, and as you move from section to section within the story, the rest of the screen or the main stage updates to show actually whatever you want to show, anything with a URL. So that can be a web map. That might, as you go from section to section, you might move around within a web map. You might show different layers within a map. But that main stage can also show photos, videos, other story maps, pretty much anything. And you can incorporate multimedia content even in the side panel as well. I should mention, by the way, going back to Cascade, that you're seeing this presentation in the form of a Cascade story. Next is Story Map Series. So it, like Journal, has a side panel, although you can opt to not have that side panel. But instead of a continuous scrolling experience, you can break the story up into sections that are shown via tabs, or like I'm using up here, a series of bullets. You can also, there's also a layout called side accordion, where the side panel has a list of numbers, and if you click on one of them, it expands to show that part of the narrative. Short list is a little bit different. So unlike the others, which are more or less continual narratives, this utilizes a curated set of points of interest in and around a destination. So that so there's a map, and there's a gallery of thumbnails. You can also organize the points of interest into these tabs. One cool thing about Shortlist is that as you pan and zoom around the map, the items in the thumbnail panel update according to what's in the current map view. So if you're exploring a neighborhood, then you're only seeing the points of interest within that area. You're not distracted by the rest of the points of interest. And the Story Map Tour was our first app, and in some ways it's the simplest. It's a series of geotagged photos and videos. It supports short form text, and there are 2 or 3 different layout options for tour as well. It's been a really exciting 7 years or so. We've seen our numbers grow exponentially. We're now well over 750,000 story maps hosted on ArcGIS Online, with many thousands more hosted within organizations. We can't see those to count, but my guess is there are about 1 million story maps out there, and it's growing rapidly. And to us, a very exciting subset of those are the stories that groups like you are producing. And I'm going to show you just a selection of tribal story maps that also illustrate some of these apps. So actually, I'm going to click over here. This actually was a prize winner in one of our Storytelling with Maps competition. Either, I'm forgetting whether it was 2018 or 2017, but beautifully done by the Samish tribe, showing the potential effects of climate change on their territory in the San Juan Islands. So they very skillfully use a series of maps to show their territory. They give a nice overview of their culture. Now, as I'm showing you this story, I want to describe how Cascade works. So what we're looking at right now is called a narrative section. So everything scrolls by as you move down the story. But then there are these things called immersive sections. So you notice as I scrolled, this background image kind of snapped into place. And instead of the screen scrolling by, now there are these floating captions, and they can be positioned left, center, or right. And you can control the transition effects. But in this case, this is an immersive section with just one background image. But with each one of these floating captions, you can change that background image to, say, be a map or a video. And you can create these nice kind of transitions, and it's just provides a nice way to kind of punctuate the story, provide a sense of rhythm, and make it even more immersive. So here's another immersive section, and they've used a different transition effect. This is a swipe tool to be able to expose different maps or different layers of maps. Or in this case, imagery showing the potential inundation caused by rising sea levels. So a really beautiful story that nicely illustrates the power of our Cascade app. I'm going to show you one other Cascade app that shows you also the diversity of topics that you can take on. So that was something that covers a large piece of territory, kind of conceptual, kind of predicting the future, and advising about resilience and adaptation to climate change. This one is a more kind of nuts and bolts guide to trails in Indian canyons, and so they've got beautiful images of the trails along with descriptions of each trail. So nice vivid sense of the landscape and a practical kind of guide to the trails in the area. In this case, they've chosen to just use a series of immersive sections, probably because they don't have long form text as part of the story. So again, it's an example of the kind of versatility of these apps. That's yet another Cascade story using, in this case, some web maps and, again, a rich mix of multimedia content, including imagery that they've added additional information on top of. Here's an example of Story Map Journal, and Story Map Journal is actually the most popular of our apps with literally hundreds of thousands of examples out there. So as I mentioned before, in the case of Journal, there's a scrolling side panel, and as you can see, as I go from section to section in the story, the main stage changes to show a series of graphics and images, maps, etc. Another cool thing about Journal is that you can have even within a single section, you can have what were called story actions. So even within a single section with bullets or with essentially like text hyperlinks, you can send people to different places. You can bring them to images. You can send them straight to a map, etc. Now here's another example of side panel. Again, using a nice variety of infographics and maps and images, and as I mentioned before, you can have multimedia content within the side panel as well, and then you can use this little navigation device to just zip from one spot to another within the story. This is an example of Story Map series. So this is the tabbed layout of series. So here you can see, very much like Journal, there's a side panel here, but it's just one section. To go to the next part of the story, I click on another tab, and it too has its own side panel. So this can be nice if you're presenting a series of maps, or you want to give your readers an option of kind of jumping around from theme to theme, if you think they're going to be interested in specific parts of the story. And then this is an example of Story Map Tour, and it's useful especially for things like this. So in this case, it's a small area, and they're locating with archival photos a series of landmarks. We see Story Map Tour used a lot for things like virtual tours of historic districts or trail guides, things like that. In fact, the Story Map Cascade I showed you that was a trail guide was kind of unusual, because we see most trail guides we see in the form of Story Map Tour or Journal. Another nice thing about Tour, and in fact about most of our apps, is that there's a way to kind of move by default sequentially through the story, but it also kind of liberates users to navigate on their own. So if I want to, I can just kind of hijack the narrative, and I can move from place to place on the map. Or in this case, as you can see, there's also a carousel along the bottom that I can use to kind of pick and choose what locations I want to look at. One last thought, and then I'm going to turn it over to Grayson, is that more and more organizations, including tribes, are creating whole series of story maps, which they often aggregate or present within a gallery. So in this case, the Seneca Nation of Indians has created an attractive place where they can aggregate all their story maps and summarize them. People can explore and discover story maps that they find interesting. And here's another map tour. So that's our array of apps in a quick nutshell. I'll be back later in our little demo to preview the next generation that we're really excited about. So take it away.
Hello, everybody. Just to reiterate, Alan, it is quite a pleasure to be presenting to you all today. I work with Alan out of Arlington, Virginia on the Story Maps team. So we spend a lot of our time either building story maps or supporting a variety of organizations, such as yourselves, in their own story mapping efforts. And so I just wanted to say that I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the stories that you produce as part of the Tribal Story Maps Challenge. So what you're seeing in front of you on your screens is the Story Maps website. So this is located at storymaps.arcgis.com. So this is a part of ArcGIS Online. It's connected with ArcGIS Online, but it's sort of the direct line to story maps specifically. And this is where I would recommend you go for finding resources about story maps as well as building and managing your story maps. Just as a note, for those of you who are familiar with the ArcGIS Online avenue, specifically content and my content, everything you do on the Story Maps website also shows up here in your content. So it's all the same material, it's all in the same place, but you can access it both through ArcGIS Online and the Story Maps website. And today I'll be showing you the Story Maps avenue. So when you come to our website, you're of course going to see our homepage and some of our featured stories. So these are recent stories that either our team or the broader user community has created. And this is a really good place to see sort of what's new in story maps, as well as get some ideas of what you can do with story maps. There's also a lot of other great resources here that I'll return to towards the end of this. What I want to point out now is this Apps tab. Under Apps, you're going to find entries for all of the different user experiences or layouts that Alan was describing earlier and showing you examples of. This is a great place to come to learn more about these specific layouts and how they work. In terms of an overview, you can access a sorted gallery of examples of that layout, as well as find a tutorial walking you through how to use this particular app. So this is a very useful page and sort of the heart of the storymaps.com or storymaps.arcgis.com website. You can also jump right in and get started building story maps here, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate today. So as you can see, I'm already logged in to my ArcGIS Online account. That's an important first step. And if you know which app you want to use, you can go straight to it, which is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to be building a story map Cascade. When I click that build button, it's going to launch a new tab and open up the builder. So this is that interactive builder Alan was describing, where you can actually assemble your material sort of drag and drop style without having to code or develop anything on your own. A brief overview of what you're seeing here. Again, this is the Cascade app. In this main area is essentially the viewer. So this is more or less what a reader will see when they come to your published story. In addition, there's a sidebar here, which is sort of like your outline view. As you start adding content to the story, it'll appear here as units that you can then reorganize, delete, and otherwise manage. And at the top here are a variety of global options that I'll go through at the end of the demonstration. Particularly of importance are the sharing settings to go from something that's private and to something that's published and public. So to start working with this, you can click into an area and immediately start typing. So I stole a blog post from the Smithsonian that had a visitation of some folks working with a traditional style of canoe in Hawaii. And I just copied and pasted that into my title space here on the cover, and that goes right in there. And as always, it's best practice to save frequently and often. And once I have that in place, I can start building out this story. So you'll notice there's a default cover image back here, and I, of course, can change that. If I click on this media picker, I'm going to get this media window that opens up. And you're going to see this throughout Cascade. So this is a standard tool that you can use to bring in all types of media, from dragging and drop images from your desktop into this area to choosing items from ArcGIS Online. In this case, I'm going to pull in a photograph from a public domain image service called Unsplash. Unsplash is a separate company. It's not associated with Esri, but we have it connected here so you can quickly find all sorts of material to populate a story map. When I select it, it's added to the cover, and that's essentially the workflow we use for adding all other types of media. As I get into the body of the story map, which is right in this white area, of course there's nothing in here yet, but I can start copying and pasting in text or typing this directly. I have it in a Word document for the demonstration purposes. So this is the author of this original blog that I'm borrowing here. Now notice when I have text in the body, I get this little paragraph icon that pops up. Now if I select that, I see some fairly standard text formatting options, such as alignment, as well as some header settings, heading 1, heading 2, as well as a pull quote. So I can break up my text to help out with readability and also to give some custom styling to the way that my story looks. To add additional sections, you'll see that this little plus sign appears. And when I click on that, it's going to give me options for the general components of what goes into the story map Cascade. Alan mentioned that there's a distinction between a narrative section and an immersive section. I'll get to the immersive section in a second, but for right now, all you need to know really is that in a narrative section, you're going to essentially be adding in text and media for the most part. So I'm going to continue to add a little bit of text here. Copy that in. This time I'm going to choose an H2 so you can see what that looks like. Now the other thing that I can do with text, if I highlight it, I get this toolbar that pops up for those more specific paragraph level styling. So bold, italic, underline, strike through. I can link out with hyperlinks, as well as change the color of the text. So maybe we'll choose some blue here to set it off as a heading. Continue to add some more text. This time I'll just add a section of standard paragraph text, which is what by default comes in there. So far I've shown you all of the text options you have, more or less. Just as I added the cover image, I can also add media to the body or inline to the story. I'm still under Unsplash when I launch. Let me just go over that one more time. So when I hover over the plus, I open that up, and instead of adding more text, I add media. And once again, I go into the media picker. And for this example, I'm going to drag and drop a photo that I have on my desktop in a folder. The folder you will not see, but if I drag an image into this area, it will directly upload it and add it to the story. For media inline to the story, I have this little edit pencil down here in the corner. So with that, if I click it and open it up, I can adjust settings such as the size of the image, as well as manage the image, such as go back to the media picker and choose something else. I can remove it. And for those of you who are concerned with accessibility, there's also an area in here to add alternative text. So this would be the information that is read in the case of folks who are using, say, screen readers to read a web page. I'm going to leave that with its defaults for right now. And maybe add a little bit more text here just to break up sort of the overall shape of this. Alan was also mentioning that we can add an entire variety of media. So this also includes videos. Videos, the main caveat with these is that they need to be already hosted on the internet somewhere. So specifically, this means it needs to be on YouTube or Vimeo. They do such a great job of serving up videos already. It's a fantastic place to go just to have your videos available. So I can even show you how I might do that if I was going to find a video fresh off the internet. So if I go here, search for something that I'm looking for, I already know of a video that's available that talks about this particular type of canoe. And when I open this up, I have all of the options that I would normally get with sharing a YouTube video. So in particular, say I find a video on YouTube, and this also is true for Vimeo, and I want to start it at a particular section or time, I can select that time, go to share, ensure that start at time is checked, and then copy this URL, return to my story map. Now, when I add a piece of media, I'm in the media picker now, I'm going to go to this tab for link to content, and I'm going to paste in that URL I took from YouTube. When I check that and add it, now the video is in line, and once I click play, it will start at that time that I had set at 27 or 29 seconds. So far, I've shown you a lot of different media types in terms of images and videos, but I haven't shown you any maps. Let's go ahead and do that now. So something I haven't done for this story, we're talking about Hawaii and the larger Oceania area. We haven't really located this story. So I might go back up here and provide a locator map or a map to locate what's happening. Again, I go through the media picker. This time I'm going to go to ArcGIS, and I'm going to create a new map. And there's a button here just to do that. So for those of you who are familiar with working on ArcGIS Online and with web maps, what this does is essentially open the web map viewer. But it's open within the context of a story map, so I'm not actually leaving my story. So this is just a default web map, but I have a few basic options right out that I can change. If I click on base map, I can change what the overall look of the map looks like. I'm going to choose something kind of simple for now. Say this light gray map. And if I don't necessarily have a lot of data to show on this map, I can add some simple annotation, such as points and names that I choose. So in order to do that, if I click Add, there is an option here for Add Map Notes. And this is essentially annotation that is just saved with this map when I go to save it. I'm going to create that. You can give it a name if you like, and it will appear. Let me just go back a second. It will appear under this Content tab, like any other layer you might have in a web map. But I also want to add some information to this map notes. So this can be simple things like a pushpin. Let's locate Hawaii here, since this is the focal point of the story. And I can add information to that point. If I had an image somewhere on the internet that I wanted to have show up associated with that point, I could do that here. I could add descriptive text. And of course, I can change what the symbol itself looks like. So let's choose something a little bit brighter and more visible. When I close it out, it is now added to my map. Perhaps I want to also identify this location. Beyond just the point, I actually want to name it. I can choose the option for text, put that nearby my point, and go ahead and name it. Now, before I add this inline to my story map, I'm going to save it. As with saving any web map, it's going to ask me for information, including a title. It's going to demand tags as well. And save it. And once it's saved, I can close out, and it will appear in my story map. So you see there's a couple things going on here that I'd like to adjust. Just as with an image, I have this edit pencil. I can go in here, I can change the size, for example. I can also pan and zoom the map so to make sure that I'm showing the part of the world that I want people to see. Once I have that set up as I like, I check that box, and now that's how it will appear when people are reading this. As always, save frequently. This is an example of a web map added in line to the story map. Now, another powerful feature of Cascade is that section that Alan was talking about called Immersive. So far, the background is essentially locked in place and it scrolls by, as that probably jittery image for you looked like. But to add an immersive section, I add it just like I would any other section, except I'm going to choose immersive as opposed to text or media. Now, when I add immersive, this is going to expand down. And so what just happened there was I'm scrolling through a standard narrative section, and then I enter into the immersive. The background locks in place, and I see those caption boxes along the side. Right now, this is just the default background, but we can add media into here just as we would add inline to a story map. Now, I showed you last time to creating a new map, but I can actually pull upon material, any material that is shared publicly on ArcGIS Online. So under the ArcGIS tab, I can filter ArcGIS Online, and then I can either find whatever is here or actually search material by name. So just for fun, let's look at sea temperature, sea surface temperature. Let's just choose this map for now. I click on that, and this is a map that somebody else has created, has shared publicly, and I have now included into my map. Now this is pretty great alone. You can pull upon a whole variety of organizations that are doing publicly available work and drop it directly into your story map. On top of that, I have now all of the power of Cascade and immersive sections to show what information is displayed in that map. So for example, say I wanted to layer up multiple pieces of data in this map. I'm just going to do a simple demonstration for now. But say I wanted to start just by showing the area, and then I later wanted to add in the sea surface temperature. I'm going to start by duplicating this map. So now I have two slides that are exactly the same. Pretty easy. Now in this first map, I'm going to go in and edit it. And as you'll see, whenever I edit a map, I also have the option to toggle on and off the layers within that map. So for this first one, I'm going to turn off sea temperature and just show the standard base map. Now in that second map, as you'll see, sea surface temperature is still turned on. Now what's going to happen when I scroll between these? I'm going to get the transition of displaying both the base map and then the sea surface temperature independently. Moreover, if I hover on this slide, the second slide is where this will appear, I have the choice of various transitions. When it comes to maps, I have one transition type, which is a vertical swipe, where I can show a comparison of, say, an area before and after a piece of information comes in, like you saw in the example of the Samish tribe. But I can do all sorts of things. I can add, say, another image here. Let's just pull something else from our Unsplash, just as an example. So now as I'm scrolling through, I get an area base map, I get some information about sea surface temperature, and then I have a fade transition that goes into an image. If I was more selective, I would have tried to find an image specifically of this area. But you can adjust all those different types of transitions right in there. So that using immersive sections can be quite powerful, especially doing, as I said, layering up data that may be otherwise very complex, doing before and after comparisons, comparing, say, an area in a base map with an area of imagery or change over time. There's lots of ways that you can put that to use. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this example. Now that I'm in an immersive section, actually, you know what? I'm sorry, I skipped something very important here. as you notice, there's also these caption boxes that come floating by. So you can direct enter your text right here. You can adjust where this appears on the screen, how big it is, whether it's small or large or medium. You can also change the theme, whether it's light on dark or dark on light, whether it's a transparent background or an opaque background. Opaque is better here. A number of other options. And of course, you have the similar text formatting options that you had earlier in terms of the styling, the color, hyperlinking, as well as paragraph settings. All right, so now that that's out of the way, I'll go ahead and conclude this. Coming out of a narrative section, coming out of an immersive section, this will, return to sort of your standard scrolling web page, you'll choose a narrative section, which will then appear with the white space again. And we always find that when you're building a story, you want to have sort of a call to action at the end, something that readers can do once they've come all the way through this, this narrative you've presented to them, and actually take another step. And this could be something similar or something very simple, such as going and visiting your web page to learn more. It also can be something more proactive, such as get involved, sign up to volunteer, sign up for this newsletter. And a really simple way to do that is to use all the functions I've already shown you. Let's add a little bit of text, but let's make it prominent. Let's make it an H1 and center. And let's add a hyperlink. So I'm just going to send people to the Story Maps website. Once that's added, it's now an active button that people can click. And also a really great practice is we do give you the option to add a credits section. So when I activate that, I can add in concluding information here, such as data sources for any of the content, image attributions, just other extra information about the making of this story map I might want people to know, but may not need to be front and center within the body of the story map itself. As always, I'm saving frequently, but now I do also want to draw your attention back over here to the builder organization function. So say I finished my story, or I was working on my story, I didn't like the order of how things ended up. I can click organize and rearrange any of these sections and click it when I'm done. Up here at the top, I also have a number of global settings that I have access to. Under this cog icon here, I can change out the information to brand it to my organization, including where the logo itself, where the logo links, a tagline that goes along in the top corner of the story, if that tagline needs a link somewhere in particular. Another nice organization feature of Cascade is being able to bookmark certain sections. So I can basically add chapters to my story map, and when I apply that, they will now appear here in the header, and I can quickly navigate to that section. The last important element of your global settings are the appearance. So I can do some sweeping changes, such as switch from a light to a dark theme, which will affect mainly the narrative sections. You'll see a black background with lighter colored text. And I also have some limited options for fonts. I can choose a font for title and headings, and I can also choose a separate font for the body. Let's change one of those just so you can see what that looks like. Now our cover is a serif font. Once my story map is ready to go, I've saved it, I've perhaps had my coworkers review it, and we've done some revisions, I'm ready to share it with the world. To do that, I'm going to go over here and change the sharing setting from private, or perhaps it was on organization if I'm working with other coworkers in my Story Maps organization. But I'm going to go over here to public. Once I click that, the story map itself, as well as any web maps and data layers included in the story map, will then become public and viewable by the public. In order to get the word out about this, these sharing options in the top right corner now become available. If I click that little share icon, I can grab a short link, and this can be used to share on social media, to send in an email very quickly. But I can also select this iframe. The iframe is a piece of HTML code that you can use to embed this story map on another web page. So this is very useful if you do have a website for your organization. You want to use story maps, and you can put it and then embed it directly into your web page and make it look more or less seamlessly like a part of your website. So I'm going to skip back over to the Story Maps website for a second, just to show you some other great tools that we have available here. So for your general management of story maps, we have this tab called My Stories. As I mentioned, that story maps are equally a part of ArcGIS Online as your data and any web maps you might have. If you go to My Stories, you'll see some of that. You'll see specifically the story maps that are in your user account. So you can certainly go through ArcGIS Online to find your stories, but you can also come here and find them for opening them up, for editing them, etc. In addition, if I click on any one story, I have a number of management tools at my disposal. For one, it's going to show me all the content that's included in this story, the maps, the images, the videos. It's also going to check whether these maps, images, videos are accessible and functioning. And so right now, this is great. No issues are found. My story map should be working as I expect. Now, say I had added a map that wasn't shared publicly. This would actually tell me that, and it would give me a one-click option to fix that by sharing it. I can also see the sharing settings here next to the map itself. Another tool I have at my disposal, just as I did from within the story map, I have sharing options here as well with this little chain link icon. So when I click that chain link icon, I'll open up some options for sharing. Now this is very similar to the options that we have when we share from within the story map itself, such as the short link that I can copy and email around or share with anybody, as well as the iframe, a little piece of code I use for embedding. In addition to that, however, I can set the size of the embed that I want to use, and then I can preview what that embed would look like in a page of that size. So here's my story map with a mocked up page of what that might look like. So this is a good way to get that iframe code if you need it. Beyond management of stories, we also have a number of other resources here. By clicking Gallery on the Gallery tab, you'll see a curated list of many, many different story maps that we've found to be really good examples of different cases, of different map journals, of different organizations and the great work they're doing. This is a good place to come if you're looking for what you can do with a story map or general inspiration for getting started with your own story map. We also have a blog that is the ArcGIS blog, where we will post a good deal of our documentation for different tips and tricks about story maps, as well as when new releases of story maps come out and what you can do with them. I'd also like to point you to our resources page, which is a source of all sorts of support documentation. You'll find video tutorials on this page, some of our past presentations. Our frequently asked questions are often overlooked, but very useful. Any repeated questions that we get from our author community, you can find here, and they're sectioned out by the different apps that they apply to. So if you're looking for something like what are the recommended image resolutions for images you might add to a Cascade or to a map tour, you'll find those answers there. There are links to our different community sites, such as GeoNet. This is another way to get to our blog. If you do have any developer skills, we have the Story Maps Developers Corner, which is where we share some of our more technical fixes or more likely customizations to our story maps. Yeah, a number of other links and resources are available to you there. So on that note, this is pretty much everything you need to know to get started with story maps. So I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Alan, who is going to show a preview of what's up and coming in story maps in the next generation. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Grayson. That was great. So we're working on a next generation story map for a couple of reasons. One is that, of course, we've had up until now several different user experiences that I've shown you. That's great, but it can create some confusion, especially with first-time users who have a hard time deciding which user experience to use. And if you start with one app, it's you can't really back up and pour your content into another app without a lot of cutting and pasting. Another issue is that for non-GIS people, the making of even simple maps can be pretty challenging. So for next generation, we're tackling both of those. Plus, we're unifying everything into a single builder function and also updating the design. So the idea with the single builder function is that you open a single app, you start assembling a story, and within that story, ultimately, you'll have the option of choosing user experiences that are like the immersive sections within a Cascade, or like a map journal, or map series, or short list, or you name it. Now, the plan is to roll some of those things out sequentially. We're going to launch the first version of this next generation app in early July, but in succeeding releases, we'll fill it in with those additional options and user experiences. Meanwhile, what we're calling our classic apps, the existing storytelling apps, will be available and up and running for a long time, for many, many months after this new version launches, so people can transition on their own schedule. Our site isn't quite ready for you to show you live, although we just launched a kind of private alpha version of it. So what I'm going to show you is a little video that I'm going to pause as just to kind of emphasize certain elements within it. So our plan is to have users start with an updated look to the My Stories page that Grayson just showed you. And then you'll be able to either open an existing story or create a new story. And then you'll have a very much a sort of what you see is what you get sort of experience. You type in title and subtitle, a byline automatically appears that you can then change if you'd like. I'm going to back up a little bit here because that's something I want to show you. Hold on a minute. So by clicking a little plus sign, it'll turn to an X, and you'll get this little pop-up that will give you a number of options, to some extent like the paragraph controls within the existing Cascade app. In fact, the next generation story map is going to bear the closest resemblance to the Cascade builder. So if you're used to the Cascade app, it'll be really easy to pick up the this next generation version. So you'll be able to choose from a number of different options. Let's say you add an image, similar controls for the size of the image. You can type in or copy in text. You can add things like hyperlinks to text as you can within our current apps. And then this is where you'll have a variety of user experiences to choose among. So this is roughly the equivalent of an immersive section, but ultimately there will be various options. So this option that's kind of mocked up here is not unlike our map tour layout or app, but again, it's all within the single builder function. So then you'll be able to move on within the story. Again, I'm going to back up just a little bit. We'll have buttons that are one of the default options. So if you want to create a prominent link, you can do that. We'll have call out quotes we'll also be able to, you'll also be able to wrap the text around small images, which you can't do in the current apps. Right now we have a separate Swipe Spyglass app that will be incorporated as an option within this next generation story map. Now, one of the cooler parts of this is that it will incorporate a new function called Express Maps. So existing GIS users will continue to be able to access all the maps that they've created or found on ArcGIS Online. But non-GIS users, really anybody, will also be able to create really simple maps using a very simple menu of options to do things like create points, to customize pop-ups, to create routes and small areas. So you'll be able to very quickly create really attractive simple maps that guide users through your narrative, and then embed those directly into the story at the various size options. We're also optimizing all of this to load as quickly as possible and to perform really well. Another really cool thing is that we're going to have, we'll start with maybe just 2 or 3, but we will ultimately have a whole gallery of themes. So you'll be able to choose among different combinations of fonts and background colors and highlight colors and things like that. And another really cool thing about the themes is that those express maps that you create will also kind of redesign themselves magically to align to the different themes. So we're really excited about this new story map. It'll also, we've got better editing and publishing options as well as part of the next generation. As I mentioned before, all our stories are already responsive, but we're working very hard to make the next generation work really beautifully on mobile devices as well as tablets and PCs. So both in terms of performance and just in terms of the user experience. It's going to be really slick. We're really excited about this. It's also going to be a very busy year as we develop this. It's a whole lot of work, as you might imagine. So that's the picture in a nutshell, and I'm going to show you this story. So we're far enough along to again to have just launched an alpha version. There will be a public beta later in the spring, probably early April. So you'll be able to kind of kick the tires on it. But this is a live story that we created using the still kind of embryonic new app. As you can see, this doesn't have the equivalent of an immersive section yet. That's the next step in our development. But it's already, even in its current state, a pretty powerful storytelling tool that we feel has a nice kind of fresh contemporary look. So I think we're starting to run short on time, and we wanted to leave a little time for questions and discussion. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alan and Grayson. That was a lot of really great content. It was exciting to see the new generation of story maps. So as soon as my screen pops up, you will see that we have time for questions. So first question, and this is to you, Alan or Grayson. Can you overlay a conceptual site drawing onto a proposed construction site?
A site drawing onto it. Well, you can certainly do it if you create a map of that site. So let's just say you've got, you might use our satellite base map to show the site as it appears today. And then you might create either directly in ArcGIS Online or on ArcGIS Desktop a plan of the new construction that you would overlay then on the satellite image. And then you could use our various tools to, either to have a kind of swipe tool to reveal the plans, or turn on that overlay layer on top of the imagery to show the project. Grayson, anything to add to that?
No, I think you pretty much hit it, Alan. There's probably a couple ways you could do it. If you work with ArcGIS Desktop, you can certainly create a drawing and georeference it and upload that as an image. Right. You could also simply use, if it's a simple drawing, the map notes that I demonstrated in the web map, you also have the option to draw basic lines and polygons using that tool. So if you needed to do something just very quickly, you could do it in there as well.
Perfect. Thank you. 2 more questions. Will the next generation of story maps be limited exclusively to Cascade Story Map?
Well, no, not really. So the idea is that the basic kind of default experience would be a scroll experience like Cascade, but you'll be able to say have a title page and then go directly to the equivalent of an immersive section and have that within that you'll be able to choose among different user experiences. So in other words, you could go directly from a title, any number of formats for a title page into a story that's very much like the current map tour or map journal, etc. Or you can create those sections within a longer kind of scroll experience.
Perfect. Another question came in. What is the best way to embed a story map in a story map? We have a series style story map and want to add another story map within it. Would that be a cascade within a series style?
Yeah, good question. We see a lot of this. So series is really useful for embedding other story maps, and I do that a lot often for my presentations. So what people most frequently do is use a series to show a number of either story map journals or Cascade story maps. It can be really effective, but with one caveat, and that is that if you think a significant portion of your users are going to be accessing the story via mobile phones, as you can imagine, the experience of story maps embedded within other story maps can start to get kind of messy on a really small screen. And I've actually seen story maps buried 4 deep, and that would simply not be workable on a mobile phone. So depending on your audience, depending on your context, putting especially Cascade or journal story maps within a series story map can be really effective, but really only for users on larger screens.
Yeah, and just to add to that, there are also URL parameters available for story maps that can help with the embed experience. Specifically, there's a parameter for it's ampersand embed, ampersand EMBED, that if you add that on to the end of your story map's URL and then embed that and use that URL to embed in the other story map, you'll then lose things. You'll minimize the user interface essentially. So like the extra header you might get of a cascade embedded in a map series will disappear. So it's a very subtle effect, but it can be very useful for getting some extra real estate. And we have blogs that talk about that if anybody needs more specific direction.
Thank you. So one final question before we wrap up. Any tips or tricks for loading tribal or indigenous fonts, or is it better to copy and paste pieces of text into the body?
Oh, interesting. So clarification question.
Cool.
Is this the font itself, or are these the characters, the actual, letters?
We might have to follow up with them offline, and we'll share the details with everyone in a post email, because we didn't get that far down into the detail in the question, but that is a great question, and we can follow up by email.
Yeah, we'd be happy to follow up on that.
Perfect. So with that, we will wrap this up. Before we leave you, we wanted to make sure all of you were aware that the Tribal Story Map Challenge for 2019 has begun. We opened the challenge yesterday. This is our first activity within. So now that you have all of these great resources, we encourage you to enter the challenge this year. The submission deadline is Friday, March 29th at 5 p.m. Pacific. All of the winners will be announced no later than Friday, April 12th. And we have some great prizes for you: an ArcGIS Online account, access to Esri training, and recognition at the 2019 Esri User Conference in San Diego. Each tribe is allowed to submit up to 3 story maps, And it is the link to the Story Map Challenge is in the questions console or the GoToWebinar console and the questions section. So you can click on that and visit the site easily. It's go.esri.com/2019 TSMC webinar, TSMC for Tribal Story Map Challenge. If you have any questions regarding this challenge, the Tribal team is here to help. Myself, Noelle Loughran, Ann Taylor, or John Gico would be happy to help. Just shoot us an email at tribalstorymapchallenge@esri.com, and we will get back to you with any of our responses. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.